Welcome, Amy, to this podcast. And thank you for joining us so much. Thank you. All the way from Australia. I'm in the UK at the moment, and you're in Australia, and we managed to find a time that works. So that's brilliant. Before we get going, Amy, I'd really like everyone who's listening or watching this to understand who you are and just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up working in the IBS space and with the Nerva app.
Yeah, certainly. So, hi everyone. My name's Amy. I am a dietitian from Melbourne in Australia. I was working in private practice as a dietitian for a few years and worked specifically with patients with chronic illnesses. So, through that, I saw a lot of patients that had IBS or different types of gut concerns. So it just sort of naturally became an area that I became interested in and learned more about because I just had all these patients and I just wanted to be able to help them in the best way possible. And yeah, over that time, I came across Nerva, which is the app that I work for now. And yeah, I used to recommend it to my patients just as something they could do to help with their IBS while I was seeing them as a dietitian. And I found that it was really helpful and a good tool. It just sort of happened one day. I saw an ad pop up on LinkedIn to be able to work at Nerva, and I thought, hey, why not? Let's give it a go. Let's try a different career path for a while. So yeah, I'm still a dietitian, but at the moment I'm working for Nerva, and my job there is essentially just to talk to health professionals all day, which I love. So I talk to dietitians and nutritionists, but also like doctors and gastroenterologists and physios and anyone's interested about kind of what Nerva is and essentially how to help better manage IBS and gut symptoms in all different
Fantastic.
parts of health. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a bit of an overview of sort of how I ended up here today.
That's actually quite interesting that you began as a dietitian, but you saw IBS people kind of quite a lot in clinic. And I, I think let's pull back then for a moment, if you don't mind, Amy, and talk about, well, what is IBS? What even does the IBS stand for?
IBS stands for irritable bowel syndrome, and it's classified by the Robe criteria under an umbrella, and the umbrella term is actually disorder of gut brain interaction, or DGBI. It used to be called functional gut conditions, and then they've changed it to DGBI, which is just useful to know if you ever hear that term being thrown around. But IBS is one example of those number of gut conditions, and it's essentially a condition where you have changes in your bowel habits and you have abdominal pain. A lot of people will have bloating or wind associated with their symptoms as well, because there's multiple types of IBS. So you can have IBS-C, which is when you're more constipated, or you can have IBS-D, where diarrhea is more part of your picture, or you can have IBS-M, where you jump from one to one, you have a mix of both. Um, so it's a really highly prevalent condition, but can be a really difficult condition to deal with because there isn't one, we don't 100% know like what the cause of IBS is, and there's one quick fix solution that you can do to fix it. So yeah, it's a really difficult condition to have, but I always found it was a great condition or patient group to work with, because patients or people are often really motivated to figure out, okay, how can I live a better quality of life, and how can I improve my life with IBS. So I do enjoy working with those sorts of patients.
That's really helpful actually to hear about the criteria for it as well. A little bit later on, we'll try and talk around hormones and how that affects the gut, and also midlife women and that change perimenopause to menopause, and how that also, in my clinic work anyway, I see that it really changes the gut quite a lot. So we'll talk about that a bit later if we have time. But thank you for setting the scene on what IBS is. And what I am so fascinated in, and I have used the Nerva app in my clinic work as well with IBS people, and it is remarkable. And now I want to set the scene here for people and the big picture. Probably a lot of people are hearing what Nerva, the Nerva app is for the first time. So can you explain a little bit about what it is and how the Nerva app differs from apps that often people with IBS use, which is to do with for like food apps and things like that, and a food symptom diary? And what is Nerva and how does it differ?
Yeah, oh, such a good question because it's definitely something that takes a little while to get your head around. Um, so essentially, Nerva is we call it, it's a 6-week gut brain therapy program for disorders of gut brain interaction, IBS being one of the most common ones. And what that actually means is it's a program that is essentially going to help you actually manage your symptoms. So compared to something like a IBS tracking app, for example, they're really great for being able to, if you are interested in like tracking your symptoms and what are your bowels looking like, how often are you feeling bloated, for example, and then you might be tracking your food as well to try and find some patterns or see what's going on. That purpose is to track and to log things and see what's going on. Whereas Nerva is very different, where it's actually a treatment program, and where it comes from is a psychophysiologist named Dr. Simone Peters from Melbourne in Australia. So she did the research behind Nerva, essentially. So for people with IBS, this treatment called gut-directed hypnotherapy has been known about for around 30 years. So it's not a super new thing, but it was something that was really hard to access. So to get this gut-directed hypnotherapy treatment as an option to help you with IBS, you used to have to go to see a specialized psychologist to get that management and that treatment. And you can still actually do that. So some people do see someone for support with that. But we saw Dr. Simone Peters saw that was like a really big gap and that a lot of people weren't doing gut-directed hypnotherapy because, as you can imagine, like with I'm sure a lot of the patients that you see, Emma, and the patients that I saw as well, like time it's so hard to even have time to see a doctor, to see someone for support with nutrition, or just fitting anything in the day, let alone seeing another health professional. And then also from a financial aspect as well, can become quite hard for people. So at the end of the day, it just meant a lot of people just didn't do it. So yeah, essentially that's why Nerva was created. So it's a digital version of gut-directed hypnotherapy and also like psychoeducation and diaphragmatic breathing. So there's like 3 components in it that you throw them all together and it's called gut brain therapy, but it's in an app instead of with a person. So I know that's sorry if that's a little bit of a rambly answer, but that's kind of how it differs from something like one of those other apps that you might have on your phone where you're tracking.
Right, it's like a food app. Absolutely. No, that wasn't a ramble, Amy. That was very, very helpful. And I know that Dr. Peters has, funny enough, am I right in thinking Dr. Peters also did her research out of Monash University? And Monash University were the people also that first thoroughly researched the low FODMAP diet. And so that's quite funny. So I presume she was literally working alongside colleagues who were deep diving into the low FODMAP IBS diet, and she's working on the gut-directed, like the hypnotherapy, which works beautifully together. It's not one or the other. They do work beautifully together. But I think it's fantastic that it's this same cohort at the same university that are so fabulous with IBS research and work. So that is very,
it's
very
so
good.
Interesting. Makes us feel special as people from Melbourne because they both come from Melbourne.
Yeah, that's right. But you are biased. You are sitting in Melbourne right now. What about this H word? So hypnotherapy. I imagine also, certainly with the people I see in clinic, when I say to them, "Oh, go and do this hypnotherapy app," they go, "What the flipping heck? Hang on a second. Isn't it hypnosis where you're kind of..." in the olden days, people would be up on stage and some person would hypnotize them and they'd fall asleep, or they'd be told to go and do something with it they would never do before. Anyway, it's actually a bit of a giggle, almost, this thought of hypnosis, which of course this is not a giggle at all. This is very serious. And I actually know there is some great research behind hypnotherapy for IBS therapy. So tell us about the hypnotherapy side of this.
Great point. And it's something that, yeah, every time I spoke to patients about it, the exact same. I would often open with, I know this sounds a bit weird, or I know this sounds a bit woo-woo, but, and then go on from there, which I think can help because it's good to acknowledge that something does sound a bit different. So essentially, gut-directed hypnotherapy is very different to what you would imagine like stage hypnosis would be like. So you're not going to be clucking around like a chicken or anything like that. It's when you're doing gut-directed hypnotherapy, it's essentially a guided state of focused relaxation. So if we break it down a little bit, what actually happens in a gut-directed hypnotherapy session, and the ones in Nerva go for around 15 minutes, there's 3 different parts. And the first part is relaxation. So it feels a lot like meditation, really. It's just getting you into that rest and digest parasympathetic state. And then you move into the visualization component, and that's where there might be words like, imagine your gastrointestinal tract is like a river, and imagine you're moving obstacles out of the river. So you're visualizing the gut-related visualizations. And then the therapeutic suggestions are the third part, which are aimed at calming the gut nerves and normalizing gut-brain signaling. And they will be, again, like gut-specific suggestions. So I always encourage people that, like, the first couple of times they listen to a gut-directed hypnotherapy session, it may feel a little bit weird, or you might go, oh, this is a bit funny. They're talking about, there's this lovely lady with this lovely voice talking about my bowels. But once people get used to it, it is quite relaxing. And the whole point of it is to reduce the visceral hypersensitivity of the nerves in your gut. So that's something that we know that gut-directed hypnotherapy does. And what that actually means is, we know in conditions like IBS, the nerves in your gastrointestinal tract are over-responsive. So when normal things happen, like your body's just digesting food like it's meant to, when people have this increased sensitivity, it just means that those things are causing a reaction, and that reaction might be abdominal pain or bloating or changes in stools. So by doing what gut-directed hypnotherapy, so by listening to these sessions, it's actually reducing the sensitivity of those nerves in the gut. So that's one of the main things that it's doing. And yeah, it's also helping to physically change your gut function, which I know sounds crazy, but
yeah, it does.
We do know it works. If for those that are interested, there is some cool research studies behind Nerva. So one of the ones from 2024 looked at giving people with IBS Nerva for 6 weeks. And they found that, 81% of people, that participants in the study that finished it, saw significant improvement in their IBS symptoms, and it was consistent across all the types of IBS. So the research is really great behind it. So that's probably one thing that helps to validate the idea of, okay, hypnotherapy sounds a bit woo-woo, but we know that we've got some good research behind it, and we've been looking into, the scientific community has been looking into gut-directed hypnotherapy for over 30 years. So it's got some good evidence behind it.
I mean, very excited. I tried it out. You let me try out the app, so to speak. And I don't have IBS, but I loved it. I couldn't believe that 15 minutes became so special in the day. And I found it immensely calming. Anyway, so I really was very impressed, and the woman's voice is brilliant. Now, it's interesting. I was listening to it in the UK, and it was a female woman's voice with a British accent. And I just wanted to ask you, this has nothing to do with its efficacy, but I wondered, have you got a different voice for different regions? So have you got a US voice for the USA and an Australian voice for the Australian region, or is it all the one voice?
Actually, no. So everybody gets the British voice.
Oh, really? Oh, that's
Yeah.
interesting. Okay. I just wondered, she has a very calm voice. Sorry, this is, once again, this is not anything to do
Yeah.
with the efficacy, but
No.
it's a really good voice, and I wondered if it was an AI or whether it was a real person. Do you know when they actually created the app?
Yeah, so it is a real voice, I believe,
Okay.
because it was we've had the app's had the same voice for the past since the start, so from the past seven
Okay.
years.
Right.
But the goal is to be able to use AI to enable us to put Nerva into different languages. So that would be the
Okay.
the goal would be
Oh,
able to use
so
AI to do that,
good.
and then
Yeah.
also use AI to be able to change the recordings to be more personalized. So that's like our
Right.
next step as a company as well, for anyone that's interested. So
Yeah.
there will be AI in the voice, but it will sound the exact same, but just
Oh,
to
yeah.
yeah, to help. So depending on whatever symptoms you put in at the start, because we know that with IBS or other disorders of gut brain interaction, you might have reflux, for example, that's functional, or you might have more constipation or more diarrhea. So if we're able to use AI in a way just to make sure that when you're listening to these recordings, they are talking about diarrhea if you've got diarrhea and not constipation, and make them a bit more
Yeah.
symptom specific. That's the next steps for Nerva as a program.
Very encouraged to hear that, and I look forward to that. So I think what is interesting here as well is for a person to understand that we're talking about the gut brain axis here, and it's something that people don't know they have a control over, but it's not a forcing. You can't say to your brain and gut access, you will not play up, you will do what I, it's not like that. It's like, it's quite a different, it's quite a different thing, because sometimes I feel like some of the people I see in clinic, they feel like it's somehow their fault that they've got IBS, but they don't realize their gut may be miscommunicating with their brain, and it's nothing to do with, it's not fault, and it's not the fault of what they eat, or the food does make a difference a lot to some people, but not much to others. But this is where I feel like Nova's also very good. This treatment direction takes away this blame somehow that it's maybe to do with the way a person's eating or what they're eating and that sort of thing. Also, it's so convenient. It's just 15 minutes a day. So as you said before, if someone's time poor, then it's a very doable.
Totally agree. I think one of the great things about Nerva is it works really well, like with dietary support, like when you need it, but at the same time, it's taking that restriction mentality away as well, and going, okay, well, let's take a little bit of a step back and look at like the physiology behind IBS and why certain things are happening, and go, okay, if there is something we
Yeah.
can do to help change the way that your gut's responding and your brain's responding, therefore reducing your symptoms and therefore reducing how much impact that's having on your quality of life,
Yeah.
without having to go, you need to change your diet in this way, that way, the other way. It just helps patients to feel empowered a lot of the
Yeah.
time, and then hopefully as a practitioner it allows you to be able to focus on expanding someone's dietary variety rather than restricting it. They're just a few of the reasons that I found it useful as a tool to use as a dietitian.
So let's come back to what I just touched on, or we both touched on at the beginning. And I certainly see with the midlife women in my clinic, I see a definite change in their gut motility, as in their bowel movements, or the bloating comes in a lot in this hormonal change in perimenopause, menopause. So I see it, so I know it's real and it's happening. And so it's almost like the hormone fluctuation in midlife or whenever their perimenopause is produces IBS type symptoms. And in some people, it is IBS, where it might have been just very subtle before. It kind of gets disturbed a lot in perimenopause. I think, would you say the gut directed hypnotherapy also has a role to play at this time in a woman's life?
I will preface this by saying I'm not an expert in this area. So, as a dietitian, I didn't specifically specialize in perimenopause area. I know that there's a lot of people that do, but I will say that we know that changes in hormones do impact the gut in a number of different ways. We know that those changes in hormones can impact your gut motility, your transit time, your microbiome composition. So
Yeah.
all those things can impact symptoms. But one thing that we also know is those changes in hormones can impact visceral hypersensitivity as well. So it can cause a change in the body's how sensitive those nerves are and how likely they are to react to foods, for example. I think that it means that something like gut-directed hypnotherapy or Nerva is something that makes sense as part of an overall management plan for someone that is going through those symptoms. It's definitely something worth trying and bringing in, especially if there is that, if there's that added level of fatigue experience during that time, or chronic pain or other things going on that are like making life difficult. And I know from experience with these patients, like making food difficult in so many different ways, this is something that they can do that's hopefully taking 15 minutes away from a stressful, exhausting life and having time to regulate a little bit and calm down the nervous system. But also, something that doesn't involve adding more layers of restriction or dietary change that is difficult when you're experiencing pain and fatigue to implement.
I think that's exactly right. And in fact, to do with the female hormone balance, looking earlier in a woman's life before perimenopause, I know you and I would have seen in clinic during the monthly cycle that those hormone changes there produce changes in the gut. And in some of the people I see in clinic, some women get diarrhea a lot around the time of ovulation when estrogen is particularly high. Others don't. Same running up to their period. Their gut can change, and people can get bloating, but also it can get really, really uncomfortable. So there's that hormonal influence again on the gut. I feel like this style of the gut-directed hypnotherapy style of healing would work for any of those instances. So it's not just menopause and perimenopause, but during the menstrual cycle as well, I imagine. I don't know whether you had any women you saw in clinic when you were a dietitian where you found that during that month, it just got particularly bad for them.
Definitely. Like you definitely see fluctuation in gut symptoms, and bloating being a big one at different times around the cycle. And I agree with you, it's very person dependent, billion different stories and examples. But I think when something that's interesting about, I guess sometimes I put something like Nerva or gut-directed hypnotherapy, I put it under the umbrella of like nervous system regulation strategies, as a umbrella of, okay, what are some things we can do to help someone with IBS or with gut symptoms on their period or whatever it is.
Right.
And so another example of a nervous system regulation strategy I would use a lot is something like resting around meals, or finding like sensory safety, for example. So some people will find like a heat pack provides a lot of safety for them and helps calm down their nervous system, and then allows them to move into that rest and digest state and therefore digest better. So I guess in saying that the point is that there is a lot of these strategies that are more broad in nature, like they can actually impact the nervous system, are really, I used to find were really good for people like that who are having fluctuating gastrointestinal symptoms across their cycle. Helpful because it's something that is going to help whether you are having a diarrhea moment or you're having a bloating moment or a constipation moment. It's helping in all of those ways, compared to, for example, a more traditional, like having constipation, like have this certain type of fiber, for example, that's only helping that and maybe not helping with other symptoms.
Yeah. Okay. That's helpful, Amy. Thank you. And it's great that you do have that experience. So you've seen it yourself in action in your own clinic work before joining Nerva. So that's really good. I feel like this top-down approach, if you can call it that, working, really thinking about the mind and how it's affecting the gut, would also probably help people to reintroduce in foods that they thought they could never eat again, because you're effectively calming, as you say, the gut down, so it's not so hypersensitive. So I think that's terrific. Really, really, really
Yeah.
good. I'm not sure whether we can answer this question, but
Mm.
bloating is a big one. Is, I have some people I see in clinic who come to me and say every night by the evening, I feel like I'm 6 months pregnant. I have so much bloating and it's every day. And and they've had this for years and they've just got used to it. And they don't realize that actually there's something going on here and it's not normal. And so, I mean, I almost call it an invisible symptom, the bloating. It's a massive concern for women actually in midlife. It's quite common, but I know can be a concern for women during their cycle, depending on how it affects them, certainly perhaps running up to their period. So, do you know much about the bloating and whether this gut-directed hypnotherapy could also help with the bloating? What's going on, and maybe or maybe not, it can help.
When you think about it from like clinical experience, I think there's a number of different things that help with bloating. And I found that for some people, something like doing Nerva really, really helpful. For other people, it may be they're actually super constipated and that's why they're bloated. So clearing
Right.
that out helps the bloating. Right. So yeah, there can be a number of things there, but I think something just useful to share in terms from a Nerva perspective is I had a little bit of a look at the data around bloating.
Yeah.
What we found was like in a cohort of like 73,000 people that have done Nerva and put their symptoms in at the start and the end, 74% of them reported improved abdominal bloating.
Oh, wow.
So,
Good.
yeah.
Okay.
So that's like a good sign.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Okay. Because
Yeah.
Because from my perspective, when someone has bloating just every night, you think, well, that's not just food, because they eat different foods, unless they're eating this one food every day that they really can't tolerate. And they didn't realize that. I mean, that obviously there's that reason. So I think that's really terrific that you have the data from people who have used this healing tool, and that it's reduced their bloating as well, or in 74% of the time it did.
Especially, I think it can be helpful to think about it a bit like it's normal to have gas production in your bowels. That is normal. That happens. The bacteria in your gut ferment with the food that's in there, and it causes gas production and it causes your intestines to expand a bit. And then the sort of differentiating factor is, in some cases, the people that do have that increased hypersensitivity in the nerves, when that expansion happens, they get pain, but then it can also feel that bloating feeling, like it feels like their gut's enormous.
Right.
To them, even if to someone else that has the same experience happening, but their nerves aren't sensitized.
Right.
They don't feel as bloated, like they don't feel like it's massive. So that's, in some scenarios, that can be a good way to think about it, that it's when there is sometimes that visceral hypersensitivity, it does contribute to bloating. And in those scenarios, that's where Nerva is really helpful, because it's actually addressing that mechanism. And then probably the other mechanism to think about with bloating, but also other symptoms as well, is if we think about kind of the gut and the brain, how they're connected, the visceral hypersensitivity is like focusing on that gut part. And then the brain part is the way that our brain actually interprets the signals from the gut. So our brain can get quite good at like noticing something like bloating or pain and going, oh, okay, that's a threat. Like that's not good.
Right.
And then that can exacerbate the how significant it feels, and then the way that your brain is processing pain is different. So that's something we see in IBS as well. And that's something that gut-directed hypnotherapy, but also like CBT-informed psychoeducation. So a couple of those treatments that are in the program. Yeah. That's another thing that it actually helps with. So if anyone relates to that aspect of it, something to consider.
Because I think also there's stress, like a person which has quite a lot of stress in their life. Now, we all have stress, and I know it's how we respond to it. But a person that's trying to work full time, has some children, aging parents, maybe they are having reasonably erratic hormones or something. There's quite a lot of stress. Maybe they don't think they have time or don't have time for exercise, and they're just grabbing food. I'm not sure of the scenario. Everybody's is
Yeah.
different, but there's that stress, and so we may have this added stress of the gut becoming really hypersensitive, perhaps. And so the brain's going, oh my gosh, more stress is coming now from the gut, and
Yeah.
so
It's too much.
right,
Yeah.
I can see how once again this 15 minutes of this hypnotherapy treatment could work on so many levels to be beneficial. So not just with this gut brain access, but also as like as a meditation tool, although it's not obviously designed to be specifically as a de-stressing tool, but it would help a person like
Yeah.
that.
It's such a common patient
Yeah.
presentation. And because, as I said earlier, like we don't know the exact cause of IBS, but we know that there's definitely a link between someone that has chronic stress on the body in whatever
Right.
way that is
Yeah.
and having IBS. So that chronic level of stress over a long period of time, some people might develop conditions like chronic fatigue, for example. And we know there's a big crossover between chronic fatigue and IBS. So yeah, we just know chronic stress on the body causes your nervous system to become sensitized in a lot of different ways. And just one of those ways is the gut. And that's
Right.
sort of, yeah, one of the ways that IBS presents.
Really quickly, we're talking, I guess, maybe a bit to do with neuroplasticity sort of angle. And when you're talking about the plasticity of the brain, like, is there any age limit? So what are the youngest people you know of using Nerva app, and what are the oldest? Do you know, is there an age limit, for example? Can someone who's what's quite old, I don't know these days, but you class as quite old, because isn't it when you're in your 60s it's the new 40s, and when you're in your 40s or 50s it's the new whatever. So but what age limits is there, or is there not?
Great question. So I know that the sort of lower age limit is, we say 14
Okay.
years old, but you definitely have some 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds that use it. It's just depends how much they want to have a go at it, how many engage with it, and
Okay.
also parental involvement can be helpful as well. So yeah, that tends to be the age that it starts at. And then in
Okay.
terms of there's no upper age limit. Something I would say
Mm.
is that often older cohorts actually have higher adherence rates. So
Okay.
actually often just from a data perspective, like do really well because they are quite good at doing it every day.
Right.
And so
Diligent.
the results are quite
Okay.
good. Diligence, yeah, yeah. So that's honestly the main thing. But yeah, from a neuroplasticity perspective, from my understanding of it, that's not a problem. The gut brain retraining, it doesn't require a level of plasticity that you would need for something like learning a new language, for example, because it is that more subconscious brain side of things.
That's good. Well, I shall say that you're never too old to use it then. That's really good. That's terrific. I think from my perspective, also hearing what we're talking about today and knowing what I do know about this tool, I think it's quite empowering, especially to perhaps a woman in that like perfectionism trap where she may feel she's failed when the IBS diets don't really work or there's a flare up. And I feel like it's not a blaming narrative where because you're not blaming food. It's just quite an empowering thing for the nervous system. When you've talked to people who've used it, do you feel like that's more of the narrative?
Yeah, definitely. What I really like is even if the person did Nerva or didn't do Nerva, just the conversation about it is empowering
Right.
in itself. So just talking about the physiology and talking about, yeah, your gut's not broken. You haven't, it's not like you've been giving it all the wrong things or anything like that. It's just, the brain and the gut are miscommunicating and the nerves are not doing what they're meant to be doing. And that's not your fault. That's just happened. And there's a number of
Yeah.
reasons why that, or predisposing factors and things like that. But it's definitely not your fault, or it's not because
Yeah.
of the food you've eaten. And yeah, having that conversation, helping the person understand that is empowering in itself. And then from a food perspective as well, there is so much pressure for people to feel perfection,
I know.
feel perfectionistic or have perfect food. And even like
Mm.
the gut health space is starting to, in some areas, can become a little bit problematic in that way. Like you've got to have
Yeah.
the perfect, have 100 different colors of fruit and vegetables and have this prebiotic and this probiotic and this. And I
Uh,
have patients coming to me and they'll be doing all these things and yeah, often like to be evidence behind a lot of those things and there were good things to be doing, but just a lot.
yeah.
And
Too
if you're
much.
putting so much time and effort into doing all those things, like something has to give. And then that's, yeah, and another
Yeah.
added stress to your life. So, yeah, this just helps to give a whole different perspective to things in a way that you can like help your symptoms without having to feel like you have to add another thing to the list that you're not doing right.
Right, absolutely, Amy. Thank you. And I'm glad you reflected that back and like just how I feel about this and see how people can get into that trap of perfectionism with food, which is actually detrimental in itself. Amy, is there anything you'd like to finish with? I feel like we covered a lot. And, we should imagine anyone listening to this just wants to go and try it anyway. But is there anything you'd like to add that we haven't covered or anything? Yeah, that you think might be helpful
Um,
at all?
Oh, the only thing that I haven't mentioned that people might be interested in is FODMAPs in a
Okay.
little bit more detail, just to add on to what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
It can be sometimes helpful to understand like how do FODMAPs and this like hypersensitive gut thing, like how do they actually come together? So if you have heard of FODMAPs before, you've been told to go on a low FODMAP diet to help with IBS. It is an evidence-based, dietary strategy for IBS. But how sort of Nerva and FODMAPs kind of go together is that how high FODMAP foods have these fermentable carbohydrates in them that your body doesn't digest, and no one's body digests. They go down, you eat them, they go down to your large intestine, and they essentially cause a lot of movement down there, and they cause things. So wheat is a good example of this, or onion or garlic. They are high fructan foods, which is a certain type of FODMAP. They cause that distension in the gut and that gas production. And they're actually prebiotics, so they're actually quite good for you and for your gut health and your gut microbiome moving forward. But with people that have this increased sensitivity in the gut, that as we we're talking about before, that change in distension, like that causes things like pain and changes in stools and bloating and things like that. So the idea behind a low FODMAP diet is to kind of take some of those triggers away to reduce your symptoms and see how many symptoms you feel each day. So it's just important to understand that Nerva can be really helpful if you're someone that's in that situation where they might have removed some FODMAPs and they felt a little bit better, that it's not something we want to stay on long term. And
Okay.
if you are open to giving Nerva a go, it can be a helpful thing to do to help reduce that sensitivity in your gut and then help you to be able to reintroduce some of those FODMAPs back into your
Right.
diet. It's a great thing to work with a dietitian or a nutritionist to like help you with it. But just want to put it out there that something like a gut-directed hypnotherapy through Nerva can be helpful for people in that situation.
Okay, that is really helpful to hear because we haven't focused on food at all. And you're right, there are some foods that might cause an issue for some people, and it is good for them to work that out. But this works so well so that their guts helps to calm and heal up and they can hopefully reintroduce in a certain number of these foods or a certain amount and that's what they can find out.
Um,
Well, Amy, this has been so
mm,
informative and so helpful. Thank you so much for joining us. And now you can go and relax for the evening. And now my day is going to start. And I will put some details into the notes below here for anyone who wants to follow through and understand Nerva. And you very kindly given a discount or an introduction offer. So I'll pop that into the notes and people can try it out, which is actually brilliant. Fantastic. Thank you.
Oh, no
Thanks,
worries.
Amy.
Thank you so much for having me, Emma. And I hope everyone found that useful. And yeah, feel free to contact us at Nerva if you have any questions or you want to talk to someone about it. There is a whole team behind Nerva in Melbourne, Australia. And yeah, we're here to help.
Right. Brilliant. Thank you, Amy. Bye-bye.
Bye.